By the way.
Hey, Jen. All right, welcome everyone to the March 18th meeting of the Charter Revision Commission. We'll call the meeting to order right at 6:30. I know we have a number of people who have other meetings tonight, so we'll try to keep things moving here. Roll call: Tyler Fairbairn, Doug Hempstead, John Levin are here in person. We have Jim Clark, Rick McQuaid, and Carl Dickens on Zoom. Let me just double check. I think that's it. We will move the public participation portion down a little bit so that we can do our council discussion. We are grateful to have Barbara Smith, Greg Burnett, and Josh Goldstein from the Common Council here with us this evening. And Steve, did you want to quickly do your piece while we have them here?
Yeah, we'll try to move very quickly. I won't go into a detailed recitation of what the changes are that I think Tanya is here, Mr. Chair, as well.
Okay.
Good. I won't go into a deep dive recitation on the changes that the CFO requested in the charter Article 10, which is the budget. They have copies, so maybe they've gone through it. The major, no significant structural changes, except we were trying to reach some clarification on an issue that has actually arisen in the last few weeks in town, dealing with the authority of the Board of Estimate and Taxation, the BET, to establish a cap on the capital budget. And the CFO had actually recommended that we basically develop parallel language. Since that time, he has come back and made an argument, which I will make tonight, so it'll be slightly different than the draft you see. Right now, there's parallel language in the draft. The CFO has recommended that we modify that so that the BET does not have a fixed maximum limit. They can make a recommendation for a limit on the cap. It will be the council's responsibility to establish the cap. So the language we have in there that would allow for a modification of the cap is no longer necessary, because the cap will simply be a recommendation. And the council will have full authority to decrease, increase, replace items that were recommended to be taken out or that were actually taken out in the initial budget. So I just wanted to make sure that everyone understood that that is a change that occurred or that will occur in the draft as a result of my conversation with the CFO earlier today. He'll be with us later in the day, later in this meeting. He's at the BET right now, and so he'll be with us at some point. And so I think the main purpose in having the council leadership here was to get their thoughts on Article 10, on their role in Article 10. It may go a little bit beyond Article 10. It may go to the interactions with the BET, the composition of the BET. So we thought it was important at this stage, as we're moving toward the last couple of months of work by the commission, to have them give us their thoughts on Article 10. In addition to that, if there are any comments on one of the political issues that you have to deal with, which is the 4-year term for city officials, I think the commission would love to hear your views on those issues as well. So, Mr. Chair, I don't know if we want to start with the president and work our way around. I'll leave that up to you, but that's all I have for my presentation.
Yeah, I think we will we'll start with Council President Smith, and then we will move along. If any of you have pressing time concerns, let me know. We'll try to be sure we hear from everybody.
Yeah, thanks, Tyler. I just want to make it clear that I will not comment and I will leave the meeting entirely when any discussion turns to the 4-year term. And so, just on Article 10, I'd just like to follow up on comments that I made, several months ago when the council came and spoke to you about, some of the things that we'd like to see. And I think that that language, let me go, I believe it's in 1015. Let me find it. 1015. I'm not finding it right now. It's the language that allows the council to reduce.
It's 1016A, Barbara.
Thank you, 1016A. Yeah, I'm trying to work with this here. Yeah, 1016A. I do think that needs some more clarification. Yeah, there it is. Yeah, and this was the language that I spoke to you about a couple months ago. So 1016A, upon receipt of the recommendations of the Board of Estimate and Taxation, the Common Council may approve, reject, reduce, or reinstate any item in the proposed capital budget. So within the maximum limits. So it sounds clear, right? It sounds clear as you read it, but we have had some interpretations of that language that what I would say I have seen in the past is, kind of like a wheeling and dealing, right? And I think that that's important that we avoid that type of thing, any kind of political wheeling and dealing. I can't say that's something I've seen recently, but, if we recall the capital budget discussions last year, it seemed like there was some confusion about, because we talked about the fire department, the firehouse. That was the big topic of discussion, and the fact that was not recommended, and some council members felt that, we could find the funds for a major project like that, and that's really not what the language. That's not how it reads to me, but someone else might interpret it that way. So I just think it needs some real clarification there.
Okay, thank you. Greg or Josh?
Before we move on, may I comment about Barbara Smith?
Just Jim, quickly, Chairman Fairburn. I don't know if you're going to have a public participation part of this meeting, but there are 2 members of the public, and one of them has their hand raised. So
yes, Greg, we moved it.
Okay.
I thought we had to kind of get you guys in at the beginning, but we're absolutely going to have the public participation portion a little later in the meeting.
Got it. Thank you.
Josh?
Thanks, Tyler.
I'm sorry, Josh. Jim, did you want to make
Yes.
a comment?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, I did. Sorry, before I was taking our other folks' comments, and this is really directed to Councilor Mendick. I think there's some further language in the document you sent us, Steve, that talks about taking money from the capital budget for putting it into the operating budget under certain circumstances. And I wondered if
The language is in the current charter.
in what you have proposed in the document you sent.
Yeah, no, that's current language. That's current authority. Where the BET has the authority to move items from the capital budget. This is after it's adopted into the general fund budget. If there's funds available, they can't defund something. So it presumes that the program that's in the capital budget will be funded in the general fund operating budget. So I think that's current language, Jim.
Okay, I thought what I read was that it could go from to be completed. A capital budget item could be moved to the operating budget.
Operating, that's correct.
Okay, and does that have any bearing on what Barbara is saying?
I don't think so.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Um,
Initial comments are, there's several parts of this that I'm not clear about, especially 10-2C under budget preview. What specific meeting is this referring to? And I asked that question currently. There's a joint meeting between, in the current structure, there's a joint meeting between the Finance and Claims Committee of the Common Council and the Finance Committee of the Board of Education, which we call a joint finance committee meeting, where we also have a large segment of that is public participation to allow the public to comment on the budget at that stage of the process, midpoint of January.
Yeah,
Wording here, I'm not, maybe Attorney Mednick can shed some light on. I'm not sure of what this meeting. Well, I'll pause there. If you can explain, what are you trying to
Yeah.
outline here?
well, this is not me, this is the CFO. I think the CFO was taking your meeting, Greg, the meeting you're referring to, and thought that that meeting should show up in the charter. It currently doesn't show up in the charter. And so this subsection, which should actually be B, I don't know why it's showing up as C, but it should be A and B. That is actually the meeting that you're describing. And I had, for the purpose of, because it was not clear to me from what the CFO said, what his purpose was. And when I talked to him this morning, I neglected to go over that with him. What is the purpose of that meeting, Greg? It was kind of a budget preview. Yeah.
The essence of the meeting is essentially to give an update to the public as to where we are in the budget cycle. At this point in the cycle, no votes have been taken, no decisions have been made. And we're soliciting public participation as it relates to, as we move further in the budget process, coming close to the finish line at this point in mid-January.
So this is almost like a second pre-budget public hearing. You have the hearing that we created in the charter, which I do know something about, the initial joint public hearing in section 10-1.
In October.
Yeah, in October.
October 1st.
And so this is basically, you're deeper into the process. You have more of a sense of where you're going, but you're still in a pre-vote mode. So this is in effect another an opportunity for the public to see where the city is in the process.
That is correct.
And the
Yeah.
public speaks.
Yes, we have a public participation section where each member of the public has an opportunity to speak for 3 minutes
All right.
on the budget process at that point.
All right,
Now,
that's helpful.
This meeting currently does not include the Board of Estimate and Taxation. The wording here indicates that the BET would be involved in this meeting, so that's new.
How do you feel about that? Again, this has not been recommended by the commission. This language comes from the CFO's recommendation.
I do have some reservations because the focus of this meeting, I mean, is the Board of Education has the largest share of the operating budget. That goes without saying. And so this is really an opportunity for members of the public, specifically those that wish to speak about the Board of Education budget, to have a voice here. I'm not of the thinking that the BET needs to be part of this meeting. They can obviously observe the meeting, but I see no reason to change the current format, that the meeting would be consisting of the Finance Committee of the Common Council and the Finance Committee of the Board of Education. Further on in this particular section, it indicates the Finance Joint Committee of the Board of Education. I don't know what that entity is. there is no finance joint committee of the Board of Education. So this whole section, I think, needs to be reworked.
So what is it? Would it be the full Board of Education? Is there a
No, it
finance?
would be the Finance Committee of the Finance and Claims Committee of the Common Council and the Finance Committee of the Board of Education, whereby we call both finance committees a joint finance committee, but it's not a joint finance committee of the Board of Education.
That's it. All right.
Can I just add to Greg's comments? And I agree that this is not, the BET does not need to be involved in this, but at this time. But there's just a subtle, you alluded to it, Greg, but I think there's a subtlety that we need to clarify, because we have been doing this joint meeting, and Greg, you're going to remember this. It was because it was pre-pandemic. I think it might have been 7 years ago that we established this joint meeting, with the purpose being, and as Greg said, the Board of Education has the largest chunk of the budget. It's the opportunity really for the Board of Education to present what their needs are publicly, so that the finance committee can hear it, members of the Common Council can hear it, and like Greg alluded to, BET can also watch that when they have the opportunity, even though they don't need to be involved. So that's really what it's the reason that it began, and I think it's important that we continue to recognize that it's their opportunity to present their needs for this particular budget season.
So it's really a Board of Education budget preview.
Correct. That's the way.
Okay.
Greg, you respond to
Yeah, the agenda at that point in the budget cycle, the Board of Ed has at that point, they're fairly well down the road in terms of the Board of Ed has at that point should have voted on the recommended budget coming from the superintendent. The council, however, has not voted on the overall budget. So again, it's an opportunity to hear the largest piece of the pie coming from the Board of Education and receiving detail in terms of the makeup of their requests to the operating budget. So that's what the Board of Ed presents publicly. The city, on the other hand, presents what are the challenges, where we're at in the budget process, but no specific numbers are shared because it's still being formulated.
Yeah, because the mayor
again,
does not,
a
the mayor
large-
doesn't, yeah,
a
the mayor
large
doesn't propose until
aspect-
February.
A large aspect of this meeting is, again, public participation to hear from all stakeholders in terms of their thoughts relating to the operating budget. If
So
we
it's the
did not
entire-
have, for example, if we did not have this meeting, the only opportunity for the public to comment on the operating budget would be when the Finance and Claims Committee conducted a public hearing, which would be further down in the process, somewhere around late February. At that point, we're fairly well down the road with the budget process.
So it's not limited to the Board of Education. It's the entire budget, operating budget.
It's not, yes, it's not limited to the Board of Education. However, that is again, the largest piece of the operating budget. There is a major focus on the Board of Education's presentation.
Gotcha. All right. That's very helpful to me. I'm sure it is to the commission as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg.
Sure.
Josh?
I just wanted to hop in. I have a few questions because I was looking at both the drafting language, but also the comments on the side, and I don't know when those comments were done. So, like, for example, at 10-1C4, right, it talks about initial joint public hearings in which it's discussed about both operating and capital. generally the capital budget, I believe even from the city side, isn't really ready to be discussed in a substantive way at that early in the process. That's so I just note that as a, in terms of when the city usually gets the capital budget and their numbers ready to go. October 1st, I think it's a rather theoretical discussion for capital budget. Obviously, Greg spoke to it as for operating budget. And since the Board of Education is the biggest department in the city, there are certainly special circumstances that accompany that. I also just had a question about, sorry, I'm moving through here. Had it flagged and I had this printed out right in front of me. Yeah, let's talk about 1015. So Steve, you highlighted this in your opening remarks, which is this is an issue that's become a live issue in the last week or so.
Gotcha.
As of right now, just to make this abundantly clear, because I had, there was some initial action taken by the Board of Estimate Taxation. There's been some reporting that's unfortunately been incorrect. The charter as it is right now does not authorize the Board of Estimate Taxation to set a cap on the capital budget. As I understand the way this is written between 1015A and 1016A, the recommendation of the commission at this point, or at least the changes being considered by the commission at this point, is to change that.
Oh, no, the way it's written, it is, what you might have missed is
The comment on the side.
Yeah, the CFO raised this issue 2 weeks ago. This was their thinking. I have been told over the years that people viewed this as an equivalent to the cap on the operating side. My pushback has always been, I don't see that language and I don't see it that
Right.
clearly.
And that's,
And the language is quite vague. I got a call from the Corp Council a couple of weeks ago to discuss this issue. What
Yeah.
they're now suggesting is they do not have they do not play a role in establishing the cap. They can recommend a cap.
yes,
And I
and
think
that's what I want to make
yeah,
sure
yeah. So
is absolutely clear in the
yeah,
language,
so
because
my language here, you can't see it, is recommended. I've written
okay,
on
because
the bottom.
just
So
in
that would
what
be a
you,
recommended cap, and so the council has full responsibility for the cap.
yeah, and also look, in 1015A, because I just see the track changes in the
Yeah.
document you sent me a couple days ago, in which, and I see there's a comment on the side about that, I think you wrote it about, that it was recommended, but that it should be removed. From what it's worth, and I'm just saying this from my perspective as chair of economic community development, like I disagree with this. I do not think the Board of Estimate Taxation should be setting a cap on the capital budget. This is the Board of Estimate Taxation should absolutely issue recommendations. As it's stated in the charter right now, those recommendations are supposed to be in writing, which is not something I believe the Board of Estimate Taxation has actually done in previous years. And I think that now, one of the great things that is part of Charter Review Commission number 1, in making the language much clearer, the really good news is the language is much clearer. So, a cursory review of the current language would have told the people on the BET, frankly, that they couldn't take the vote that they did the other day.
Yeah, and the
But
language, the language is bizarre because they have a requirement to approve the way it's written right now,
Right.
as opposed to discuss or act upon. But I made it clear that the CFO came back and we had a discussion today. I think I may see him in the room.
He's here with us.
Yeah, I see him.
I do
I see
see
him
him.
on the lectern. Yeah.
I do. And that his recommendation, the reason he was recommending removing it is he simply wants the BET to recommend the capital budget, and within that recommendation to be a recommended cap, but it is not binding. The decisions will be entirely up to the council.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, and I wholeheartedly endorse that particular
Yeah.
course of action. I would also appreciate, and I say this both from a public transparency perspective, as well as a helpful aid to council members. having those recommendations in writing and spelling out the reasons by which they are recommending what they're recommending is a really important document, not only for the public to understand where the BET is coming from, because they do bring a level of expertise to these, to this process, and I want to respect that. And I think I also have just learned, and this is part of just my legal background, but also just like I've just learned this over time, that when you put something in writing, you really do have to articulate your thoughts, and putting it on paper really is a certain level of rigor that just saying it doesn't have. And so a document like that would be, from my perspective, greatly appreciated. And,
Yeah,
and for what
the
it's
language-
worth, any
the language
any
is-
item that comes through economic community development, I asked all department heads that people write memos before submitting it to the council, and it honestly has streamlined the process so much more, because that way, when someone's coming in to present an item, they know exactly what they want to say.
So
And
the
it's
question I
very
have is, I've never heard of a budget that wasn't in writing, or a budget.
It's not the budget that's in
recommendation.
writing. It's that if you read the charter as it is right now, the BET is supposed to issue their recommendations in writing.
Yeah, I see it.
That just hasn't happened.
So I don't know, how do you enforce it?
Well, I mean, obviously you gotta, I mean, we don't get to slap fines and handcuff people. It's, we hope that the BET will, with hopefully, the help from the CFO or staff, provide sort of a helpful aid to us. Even if it's something in bullet points or something that can help us understand as best possible what their recommendations are. Because, I mean, look, the vote the other night, there were reasons that were brought up as to why, about their rationale about recommending a lowering of the cap. Of course, that's not the way they phrased it, but that's essentially what it was. So, I realize that, there are lots of times where we issue requirements in city ordinances and in the city charter that are not the easiest to enforce, but at the same time, having that paper trail and an effort towards, transparency and public notification, I think is really important, and we should strive to do our best to do that.
Right.
Yeah, Mr. Schmidt, if you'd like to address any of that?
Sure. Just, Josh, to your point, with regard to the BET putting in writing what they were recommending, they will do that. They have to do that. The deadline hasn't hit. So that meeting actually happened about 4 weeks before it's required to happen, just because of the way that the calendar was working out. And so they still have some time, and there will be a transmission of the BET's recommendation and whatever the rationale is behind that recommendation. So that will happen. And then just to back up what Attorney Mednick was saying, the language, the current language for the BET's authority is it is a little strange, and so I was recommending that it be changed, and that it be characterized and explicitly written as a recommendation from the BET, not as a mandated limit or cap on capital authorizations.
Yeah, and I greatly appreciate that. And I know that just obviously as the charter is written now, the BET does have until, I think it's April 1st, to issue their official, transmittal or really sort of set of recommendations, because the council has until the 15th, so 2 weeks later, to vote. I just also, and I mean, it's the same sort of question about 1016A, but I feel like, Steve, you've kind of answered this
Yes,
about this language, about after the words majority vote of the council, all of this track change language here.
yeah, that will be modified or eliminated, because there will be no recommended.
Yeah.
Cap. You're gonna set the cap. You have total authority on how high or how low the capital budget will be.
And by the way, I also wholeheartedly agree with Council President Smith on particularly the word reinstate, because I don't understand what that means. Because if the mayor proposes capital budget, BET, they make their recommendations and they want to propose, I don't know, a project A. And then someone recommends that we not approve project A. It's not reinstating if we decide to authorize project A. We're just declining to listen to a recommendation. It's not, I don't know what we'd be reinstating, I guess is my question. And I know Council President Smith has a similar thought on this. Approve, reject, reduce, that seems very clear to me. But it's that.
Yeah, it was not clear to me when I had my conversation with Corp Counsel about this issue a couple weeks ago. What and this is historic language. This is not new language. This is in
Right.
your
No,
policy.
I'm saying if
And
someone
it's just
can,
not clear what you're reinstating, because it's not as if a body is taking anything out. No, if they are recommending that you eliminate something from the mayor's proposed capital budget, is that really a real reinstatement? Not really. You're
right,
just
and which is
not- you're just
why
rejecting
my feeling would be that if the language is vague or something that is too hard to interpret through, just for, A, just like vernacular understanding of the word, but B, using the history of the charter. If we can't do it, then we should probably cut the word.
So the question I have for you is, if there is, you've gone through a process, the mayor has made recommendations.
Yeah.
You and the council are aware of items that were maybe not included in the mayor's capital budget.
Yeah.
And the question is, do you want the capacity to raise those types of items at the stage where you are considering the capital budget? Is it
That,
it's kind of a de novo consideration of an item that was rejected? I don't know if that's what the reinstatement language was aimed at. Yeah.
right. I mean, but what that means is the mayor had a proposal to include, again, I'm going to call it Project A. At some point, the mayor decides, I don't want to go forward with, or I don't think we can afford to do Project A at this time. And so the mayor removes, essentially, Project A from his or her proposal. At that point, then, all we'd be doing essentially is raising the cap for capital budget, which isn't actually an authority that we have under the charter. Right? All we can do is approve, reject, reduce, or reinstate. I don't think reinstate means add. So again, there's a thorny legislative history with our charter. As I understand it, I don't believe the council actually has the power to say the mayor comes in with a capital budget of $460 million, $200 million, making up a number. Way too big a number for this example. Say the mayor's capital budget is $200 million. And the council says, hey, I'd really like to do Project A, B, and C, and therefore raise the cap budget to $250 million. I don't think we have the authority to do that. So
the question
again,
is, do you want the authority to do that? And this is what a charter revision is all about.
yeah, no, I'm thinking about this,
Yeah.
and like my gut feeling would be there would have to be very special circumstances and a very high threshold for us to be able to successfully execute, have that sort of authority.
What you're saying is that the mayor sets the max.
Well, the mayor proposes the capital budget, right? And it's the council's authority historically has been, again, to approve, reject, reduce. I'm gonna just not really talk about reinstate because again, I don't really know what that means. For us to have a new power.
Josh, can I, just before you,
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think I understand where the reinstatement comes from, and to understand, you gotta take another step back in the process, where the first
I don't know what's
step
going on.
is
Lost
the
everything.
proposals from the departments. And
Yeah.
at that point, we get it in the finance department and look at that as part of the mayor's proposal, and we may take some things out of there. And as we did in the
Right.
case this year. And so I think that's what it's allowing, is that not that you put whole new items that have never been part of the process ever, but that you could go back and grab some of those that were, because we do have a record of that. We keep record and keep track.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, so I think the intent was that those items you could add to your proposal.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the thought that I've had is the mayor's, like, at that point, then the question we're asking is, what is the proposed capital budget? Because is the proposed capital budget what all the departments submit and the CFO and his team then go through? Or is it what the final product of that review is? Right? Because department heads submit their asks. CFO goes through. Ultimately, the mayor and their team need to make a decision about what their proposed, what the administration's proposed capital budget is. Right? I would imagine once the administration's made a decision about what their proposed capital budget is, you're saying then the reinstatement would be the council taking a project that was considered at the very beginning of the process and plopping it back in. So essentially overruling the mayor's proposed budget, which is something historically I don't believe we've ever done.
And can I just add here too? I mean, I think that, without like significant meetings with the CFO and with the mayor and with the BET who've already made recommendations, to add in a project, that affects the debt service is, potentially irresponsible, right? So Josh, I agree with everything you're saying, and I think this idea of reinstatement is just it's
I just
tricky,
in thinking
very
about
tricky.
I was just trying to give an explanation for what.
No, I think it's the right, again, I think understanding the rationale is important, and I think you gave the most plausible explanation of what that could mean. I just think that it could be potentially misused or reckless if the council at the very last minute throws in a project. And look, capital projects, they don't come in one size. Some capital projects are a few $1,000s, a few tens of $1,000s, and some of them could be millions of dollars of projects. And so, I just can't imagine a situation where the process goes all the way to the end and the council says, Board of Ed or TMP wants to put in, had tried to do this $10 million project and everyone said no, and we're going to just decide at one meeting to just put it back in.
Mr. Chair, may I raise a question? Because I think I have an example of where this might have application, and I'm not trying to be argumentative, but
No,
you currently approve a 5-year plan. This proposal lays it out to 10 years. So remember, you've left planning and zoning out. The Planning and Zoning Commission looks at the capital budget as well to make sure it conforms with the plan of conservation
POCD.
and the POC. So let's say that you have in the proposed capital budget, which would have been year 2 of the last approved plan. There's an item that was in year 2 that everybody approved. Everybody thought it was a really good idea in the prior fiscal year. And the mayor has now come in the next year with now year 1, which remember is year 2 in the planning process, and left something out. And that might have been a project that members of the council thought was a terrific project. And so I don't know whether reinstatement would apply to that type of thing. And that's gone through the whole process. Unless, and I'll have the CFO correct me if I'm wrong, does the Planning and Zoning Commission look at the entire plan for, or are they simply looking at the 1-year capital budget? Jared,
They're specifically looking at the 1-year capital budget, because that's what's gonna get approved for.
so they're not looking at the overall plan.
Yeah, we don't typically vote on plans, on capital budgets multi-years in advance. I mean, given a project can take multiple years to do, but a project gets approved in 1 year. I mean, if we approve the construction of a school, right? And the school is a multi-year construction project. I mean, take the South Mohawk School, right? That was approved in 1 capital year, even though it'll take 2 years to complete the project. So I'm not sure that's entirely applicable. And again, like if I'm wrong, I could be wrong. I just don't think I am. And Barbara, Greg, I don't know if you guys have thoughts on this.
Yeah, I
particular
mean, we could have a project that might have a $10 million price tag associated with it. And as opposed to putting the entire $10 million in one specific cycle, they might spread that out over 2 cycles. And this year
Yeah.
we put in $5 million, and next year we put in another $5 million. We see the whole plan. We know it's going to take 2-3 years to do the plan, but there's no reason that you have to put the entire amount in year 1. You can spread it out, which has a impact on the bottom line in terms of what we're actually bonding for.
Well, that's the essence of the multi-year plan, so that you can
Exactly.
see how a plan, but the point I was making is that in that multi-year plan, you have in planning year 2, you have a project that doesn't show up in the next capital budget.
Yeah, that's a good.
That's the scenario I was laying out for you.
I do
correct.
want to clarify one thing. Just because it's authorized, just because the project gets authorized as part of the 1-year plan, doesn't mean we're bonding for it necessarily. So you could still implement that same concept and say, okay, we're going to authorize $10 million. However, we may bond 5 million the first year and bond 5 million in the second year. So the authorization gets made upfront in a single year, but the actual borrowing takes place over a couple of years. And that's why we have this whole list of authorized unissued bonds that we always deal with.
Gotcha.
Can I recognize Doug quick? Doug's had
I first have a question, but I want to give you some examples of what has happened in the past and 3 different things you discussed. There was 1 year a capital budget went through, all the channels got to the council, and in that budget was $1 million for redevelopment to acquire some properties. We're going way back. When $1 million actually bought you something. The council then proceeded to decimate that 1 million and instead put it into parks, put it into a whole bunch of other issues. So there hasn't been, sometimes at the end game, a radical difference. Also, there's been times on capital budget requests, what Greg was just talking about, and one that comes to mind is some of the drainage projects we did over the years were multiple years and multiple areas, pretty extensive. And you might get to, even though you're planning to have 500,000 1 year and 700,000 year 2, you get to year 2 and going, we because of delays or whether we're not going to be able to do this in the next capital budget, so you pay a smaller section in, and knowing that next year over, it's going to roll over. And the third scenario was, I can't remember the item, but there was we had gone through the capital budget with the BET. Was going to send it over to the council, and there was items that came up that we felt were a lot more important, and so did the mayor at the time. So they went back through, even though it's laborious, the process. The mayor then resubmitted to them, asking them to include in the capital budget those additional items. The Board of Estimate approved it, and the P&Z approved it, and the council approved it. So there is a methodology. Now my question is, the council, what I'm understanding now, wants to set a cap on the capital budget, but then there, as in the cap that you submit to the Board of Estimate on the operating budget, the same style. So the Board of Estimate and Taxation doesn't have to approve the amount of the cap.
So
the
I
operating
know how it
side.
works now, but I'm saying if you're changing a scenario around where council putting
The-
a cap.
I think the cap is much clearer on the operating side, the cap that's set by the common council. For whatever reason, the language on the operating side is a lot clearer.
Oh, I know that, and I think I brought up in the early beginning, sort of Barbara way back when we the first meeting, that the language is a little ambiguous about how the capital, but I thought, Josh, were you suggesting that the council set a cap on the capital, on the capital budget?
No, that was
Okay.
not, that wasn't
I'm
my
sorry.
intention. My intention was the question and the sort of what we're exploring are what are the powers of the council in this particular situation. I think you kind of scooted by between Doug and Greg Burnett a really good point about the word reinstate and the circumstances by which a project can be reinstated, which makes me think, and Steve, sorry, we need to define the term. We need to define the situations in which reinstatement's actually appropriate. And if there's a test or factors that need to be met to warrant reinstatement, then we need to lay it out, because Greg and Doug laid out some really important scenarios where that may very well need to be the case, right? And so then I'm thinking a little differently just based on what they just said, that perhaps, and I was thinking about it earlier about sort of special circumstances. Doug and Greg more or less laid out some of the special circumstances. So I think some definitional language or some sort of like a 3-factor test kind of thing might be really helpful here. And Barbara, Greg, I don't know if you agree, but that's kind of my feeling at this point. Just food for thought.
I will look at the minutes and I'll talk to Doug and Greg, and try to do some kind of test for what reinstatement is.
Yeah,
if
because
that's-
that way it does give the council the power. So if the mayor tries to defund a already approved project, and that project has popular support and the council believes in the project, the council should be able to, under those circumstances, reinstate, or rather, sort of reauthorize an already existing project or refund. I don't know what the best verbiage is, but that's kind of that would be my
Gotcha.
thought. Also, 1016D, Greg, you brought this up earlier, and I think you're right, where it says the common council is required to hold one or more meetings and at least one public hearing. I think it might be worth specifying that be a joint meeting between the Economic and Community Development Committee and the Finance and Claims Committee. Both of those committees have, obviously the Economic and Community Development Committee currently sort of has jurisdiction over the capital budget project process, but considering the expertise and experience that members of the Finance Committee bring, I think having that be a joint meeting where department heads and people come and present, I think that might be a valuable exercise and a way for more members than just one committee to have, to be present and participate in that process. So I think it might be to tell that.
My thoughts to that are from the beginning of the charter revision process, I raised the question as to why is the capital budget going through economic and community development and not going through the finance committee of the common council, similar to the process that we're using for the operating budget. And as I look at the wording of the chart, the charter, it does not specifically say Economic and Community Development Committee. It says Common Council. So does that
That's right,
mean?
and it also doesn't. Right, I agree with that, and it also.
So does that mean either the operating budget or the capital budget? Because the wording in the charter just indicates common council, that it's up to the council to determine what committee does the vetting
Yes,
of the operating and capital budget?
Yes.
that's how.
Yeah.
Yes,
The answer is yes, because it's a council responsibility, and how you internally parcel out that responsibility is up to the council and its rules. So if you have one committee of jurisdiction or multiple committees that deal with it, the way I tend to put the language in, if you want a committee reference, is to have the committee or committees of jurisdiction, because you have a right to change the names of your committees. Why would you lock in the names of your committees in the charter? So, so we can do that in the charter, but I'd be reluctant to recommend specific committees because it would restrict your ability to change the name of your committees, which are really governed by your rules. And that's why,
Well, please tell me Recreation and Parks isn't anywhere in the charter.
no.
You know, and to add to that, Steve, you know, it's just important to recognize that, you know, so the Economic Community Development Committee used to be called Planning, right? And so
Right, that's true.
because the capital budget needs to align with the POCD and had, you know, all the process through the Planning Committee or the Planning Commission, as it used to be. You know, there is still some, it's a lesser process than it used to be, but you know, it's got to go through the Economic Community Development name change to assure alignment with the POCD. So that there's that aspect of it. But I think that, you know, Josh and Greg, you know, you brought up this question a couple months ago, and Josh, I think you make a good point. A joint meeting is I think an important addition.
Yeah, and what was I gonna say? Look, I mean, that's my thought. If you want to craft language that says including, if you don't, that's okay too. That was just sort of my thought at this moment. That's sort of all the thoughts I have on this particular section. So
Okay.
I really appreciate all the work you guys put into this. I mean, this is what we call a yeoman's job. And you guys, you know, obviously those of us on the council, I think I could speak for all of us, greatly appreciate it.
Thank you,
So,
Josh.
Absolutely.
Are we, I know it's 7:22. I know a few of us have some other meetings. I know there's some other subjects that wanted to be discussed as well.
Chair,
But
do you
anyone
want to raise
before
the
we-
issue of the structure of the BET, or should we leave that to another meeting? I did talk to the president about the issue. I don't know if Greg has any thoughts on it. And this is the issue of the composition of the BET, whether the council should play any
Yeah,
role
okay.
in defining the composition of the body, either through council representatives on the BET or council selected members of the BET. There's a slight difference in what that means. So that was an issue I did raise with the president in our brief conversation before this meeting. That might be useful insights for the body.
Yeah, and Steve, you had mentioned that you would, you know, bring in some recommendations that you have seen how other communities have done this.
All
You
right.
know, yeah. So I you know, I tend to think that you know, if we are going to move in a direction like that, you know, ideally it would be the chair of the Finance and Claims Committee as well as one other member of the council. You know, and that's and again, you know, it's a heavy lift. It's asking a lot of that particular, you know, Finance and Claims chair. But I think that that's possibly a good approach. But I think, you know, hearing, you know, some of your recommendations, I think are really important here. You know, we have very defined roles. BET has its very defined role, particularly, you know, in both operating and capital budgets, right? So, but I think that, you know, and as we have talked about in the past, it's, you know, for the council, you know, we answer to our constituents, right? And we need a voice with the BET because their role is just to simply, you know, not simply, I don't mean to use that word, but, you know, it's really about what is the tax burden on our citizens. And, you know, I just think they need to hear from council members who are elected.
All right, so what I'll do, the president reminds me, we did have this part of the conversation, I probably forgot. Mr. Chair, what I'll do is I'll put a comparative document together to show different alternatives. There's not going to be a lot of examples because there's very few places where in larger cities
Yep.
where this has occurred. I can look back historically. I can tell you what the New Haven model was in the 1980s before they eliminated their board of finance, which was closer to the Board of Estimate than it is to the Stanford Board of Finance because it was appointed by the mayor. And so it had very similar functions. So I'll try to put together a comparative document, and I'm sure we could share it with council leadership after we take a look at that.
Okay.
Thank you.
All I have to say, I'm sorry, Doug's got his hand up, and then I wanted to just chime in briefly.
Doug, please, and then we'll go back to Josh. Josh again.
So is a possibility, I'm just trying to get a sense of what you're discussing about being responsive to the constituents. So would you consider, is the consideration an option to go to an elected Board of Estimate taxation?
Well, that's always an option. I don't think that was raised here, but I think that is always an option.
I mean, I know some cities have RTMs, the RTMs are the financial people too, the vote on the budget, so.
Doug, Doug, I
another
apologize. Doug, I apologize. Can I ask you to repeat that? My husband just came and asked me a cookie.
No, okay, no, I'm just asking.
Distracted me, you know?
In the response to the consideration for responsiveness to the taxpayers, the constituents, then is consideration, is this item for consideration also to have an elected BET? Because that way there would be direct, to the constituents. So that BET member has their own constituency they've got to answer to, which is bigger than, I'm just asking the question because
Yeah.
if you're changing
It's a good question.
so.
Mhm.
So if we can find out if other communities have that, I know, I mentioned other towns have RTMs, and the RTMs are also their finance, they vote on the budgets also. And I know other communities have a community-wide vote on the budget, Wilton used to have it, I don't know if they do, I think they got rid of that one.
Greenwich license BET.
I think
Okay, there you go.
another option that might address the council president's concern about responsiveness to constituents is perhaps alter the appointment authority. Currently, it is the mayor that appoints the 6 independent members of the BET. Would an option like, I don't know, half the members being appointed by the council and half appointed by the mayor be sufficient to address the concerns that you expressed?
And that's an interesting possibility too. I mean, I think Steve, would want to hear from other communities, we are in an odd spot, right? Having this body that, no cities here in Connecticut have, but other small towns still have. And I'm not proposing that we make a massive change. I think that, that's something that, if we wanted to move in that direction, I see that as a long-term process, and maybe more with the a future commission. But what I think that something that I've learned through the workshops that we did prior to setting this commission is that in the communities where the elected body has the authority, I think we would have to look at the say we were to give the authority to the council, right, to set the operating budget. I think that you would have to look at it more as a job as opposed to a volunteer position. We already have a very heavy lift, and I know, John, you're really behind this, but I think that we'd really have to look at adequate compensation to take on that additional role. And I know, I understand that, you have, kicked that idea around, but we're volunteers, right? We put in a lot, and I've watched your meetings, we're on 8, we have 8 committees. Most of us serve on 4, as well as other, commissions. So it's really a lot. And the compensation is, as we know, just, it's really a volunteer position right now. So I just wanted to throw that out. I don't see that that's something that we are ready to make that type of a change, but just tossing out that idea.
I would also like to comment to Attorney Mednick. If we go down the path of having a member of the council sit on the BET, defining what their role would be sitting on the BET. If it's just to be an elected figure serving on the BET, I think, I would want to see specific responsibilities associated with having a member of the council sitting on the appropriation board. What would their role be?
Yeah.
And the value that they would bring to sitting on the board. I think there's no concern, as I see it, as it relates to communications between the council and the BET currently. What are we trying to address by going down this path? I would like to further understand the rationale behind even thinking about having a member of the council sitting on the BET.
You don't want me to answer now that you want that as
No,
part of
no,
my
no. I'm just
my
posting. Yeah, I
comparative
know you're
analysis.
going to do
Okay.
more
All
research,
right.
so I'm just adding that to your
Yeah.
checklist.
Yeah, no,
Um,
and Mr. Chair, that is Mr. Chairman Burnett, that is in fact, I'm well acquainted with it because that was the New Haven model in the 80s and 90s before they eliminated that. So I know that model very well. It doesn't exist anywhere else where you actually had actual aldermanic representatives on the Board of Finance. So I do know that model, and I'll present it when I give the different alternatives. Thank you.
I realize I'm joining late. I just was chairing the BET. And so I'm just joining now. I don't know how much conversation or if what I'm about to say is a rehash of what's already been said, but I always use the example of the year that I served on the Common Council to fill a vacancy. In that year, the budget was passed by a vote of 8-7 in a 14-1 Democratic majority Common Council. And so if we were to have in that year a member of the Common Council serving on the BET, presumably that member would have been chosen before the vote. And so it would have been either a member of the 7 or a member of the 8. And I'm not sure how much value that would have added to the discussion, since it could have tipped, they could theoretically have tipped the scales one way or the other because the vote was so close to begin with. So it seems like in that year, and that's, that could happen again, I suppose. You really aren't adding any value to what's occurring other than sort of like a distorting the role of the Common Council in the first place.
I think that's a valid, I think that's a valid point, and but I do think that one of sort of the fundamental, two things are true at the same time. On the one hand, the members of the BET are appointed officials, which means that the mayor is since the mayor appoints the BET, they're the ones who are ultimately held politically accountable, by voters. So if they don't like what the BET is doing, they can hold the mayor accountable for that.
Or the Common Council, because the Common Council approves.
Well, and so that's the thing. The Common Council approves. So the Common Council is also held accountable. And that's the system of sort of the check that we have right now. However, as a practical matter, and I think one of the frustrations that council members have all had about the operating budget process is that, we hear a lot of feedback, and we have no problem with the fact that we hear a lot of feedback from constituents who are really invested in the process and who care for various reasons. It's generally parents who care about the school budget, but there are people who care about all sorts of projects that come from the operating budget. And our specific role, though, in the operating budget is really sort of a blunt instrument. We set the cap. And so it's hard to square the fact that on the one hand, we are accountable to the voters, and we should be, and voters should hold us accountable for the votes we take, as any elected, I would hope any elected official would say. But, there are limits to that power. And so I don't know if putting a council member on the BET is the solution to the problem, but I know that this is a subject that's been one of frustration over years. So I just, and look, I mean, I think John's thought about having some as council appointed and some as mayors appointed is an interesting idea. I'm not sure I'm fully behind that at this point, but it's certainly an interesting one to put in the hopper. And just, and think about. But this has always been a tension. And some of that tension is intended, and I think a good thing. I think the BET serves a valuable function. But yeah, in most cities, it's an elected board of finance or whatever you want to call it. And we have a different model, and I think that's designed so that we can put different kinds of people who may not want to put themselves on a ballot, but who are willing to volunteer and toil and go through the line by line budgetary review. That's really important. So I don't know. I don't think I have the answer to this one, but
If I may, I think it's a little bit of a double-edged sword because
totally a double-edged sword.
because on the other hand, the city council, the common council can say, it's up to the the BET,
True.
takes a knife to the thing and it's not and it's not us. And as a practical matter, the carving up that occurs on the BET is pretty minuscule. There's very little of any major substance that occurs on the BET that the common council hasn't already done. It may be a tweak here and there, but as a practical matter, it's really not that much. The city has had a AAA rating for the last 12 years that the mayor's been in office, and and so it's worked pretty well. And a lot of these cities where it's elected, where the Board of Finance is elected, or where the city council or the board of aldermen or the
Right.
whatever you call it, it may not have AAA ratings. They may, I've checked, and not all of them do, and many of them have less than AAA ratings. What I would like to see on the Board of Estimate and Taxation, currently there is no requirement that the BET have at least one member from every district, from every council district, which is a little odd. But I would like to see the BET at a minimum have a member, have a requirement that there be representation from every council district at a minimum, including the minority party representation and the like. So that would be my suggestion.
Can I just add to that? And I think that that's an interesting suggestion, Ed. But I want to add to that comment, because that was something during the workshops that really struck me, is that the cities that had the elected finance board were struggling financially. And, with and it goes back to, my comment about, the capital budget and the wheeling and dealing. I mean, you have, you occasionally have those, politicians that either are elected and they have pet projects and they want to push them through. And that's a concern for me. And I think that the AAA, a lot of people will say, oh, we don't need it, but it saves us millions of dollars every year,
Oh,
that
yeah.
AAA bond rating, in our debt service and with the interest rates. So I think it's really important to keep that. And I think we have a lot to be proud of in terms of the financial health of the city right now.
I do too. And that was the point I was trying to make by saying that there are certain kinds of people who are willing to volunteer and have the expertise to go through, but who may not want to put themselves on a ballot. And I don't blame them for that. But we want them to be involved in the city. The other thing I would note too, and I know this is a comment that's been brought up, is making sure that there's professional diversity among the members of the BET as well. A lot of times, if I'm not mistaken, people who generally get appointed to the BET have some level of corporate financial experience. Obviously it's hard to find this, but different kinds of experience, including if you can find it, people with municipal financial experience. But I do think putting some sort of a premium on diversity, and I think Ed's right. I think we should have representation from across the districts. It's certainly that someone from every district in Norwalk should be represented. And also I think we should be looking at professional diversity, obviously, as well as gender and racial diversity as well.
But just for the record, I have established in charters qualifications, professional qualifications. You want to make sure in those professional qualifications that in order to grab diversity, there may be business backgrounds where you're not going to have somebody who's in a C-suite, but somebody who actually runs a business.
Right, and that's important.
yeah.
I mean, it's like
Yeah.
why we have an ordinance committee which has people who aren't lawyers on it. Like that's important.
Absolutely, I agree.
They serve value. You don't, it would be a mistake if you just put a bunch of lawyers on a committee. I mean, as Steve knows, you put a bunch of lawyers committee on, nothing happens. So,
I would just.
I've been told we can't celebrate St. Patrick's Day. Somebody told me earlier because we can't go by the bar or something like that. Really, whatever. We can't pass the bar, but whatever.
I see. I would push back a little bit on that. I mean, I think that if we're going to have diversity on the BET, I think it should include people from all walks of life, regardless of financial background.
yeah, absolutely. I agree with that.
Because it's at the end of the day, it's sort of common sense. I mean, the finance department are the experts, and the Board of Estimate in some ways are just, in many ways, really just reflect policy as much as anything else.
I think you've said it right.
Yeah.
So I'm hearing requests for a variety of features of the 6 appointed members of the BET. Diversity is one, professional experience is another. I can't quite understand how that gets put into a charter, but maybe Steve would have some ideas there. But one consistent request that I have heard is a greater level of accountability than currently in place with the appointing structure. Josh, after hearing your comments about accountability, I'm liking my idea a little bit more, and that is simply reassign a portion of the appointing authority. Instead of 6 appointments from the mayor, maybe half from the mayor and half from the council. That way, the council will feel, at the very least, that it is responsible for the actions of the BET, or more directly responsible for the actions of the BET, and then can simultaneously pursue any desired goals with respect to diversity and professional experience.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and I think, I'm certainly open to that. And I think that, that in your discussions and in, your, Steve, what you can bring from what other communities are doing, I think, that's where you can go now.
Thank you.
Yeah, so,
Okay.
all right. All right, Josh, I think you can go to the ordinance committee now.
Well, no, I actually think we're at a different point of the meeting now.
Yeah, Josh may want to discuss the 4-year term. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
Joe?
I didn't know if that was something
okay.
you wanted
Yeah.
to discuss.
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna leave on that note. So,
Yeah.
thank
Can I
you.
ask one?
Doug had one
Oh,
quick question.
wait,
has to
Doug,
do with the budget.
wait, Doug, go ahead.
Well, the question about the budget is the timeline of your presentation to the time you have to vote on the cap. Now, having experienced it, I've been trying to educate people that it's too tight of a timeline, because basically you're handed it on a Tuesday and are we gonna have to have a hearing and vote on it? Is there anything that the council's looking for to change the timeline? You're presented with the cap on the operating budget, and that would also go to, I guess, an effective capital budget if that happens, to the time you have to vote on it. If
Greg?
not,
Well, what we have found historically is once the cap is set, you're correct, Doug. There's usually about 7 days before the cap is considered final coming from the council, and then it's presented to the BET. That 7 days allow for additional debate and discussion should there be any issues with the operating budget cap at the council table. For more information to be presented, more dialogue to be held, to get to a point where the council agrees on that operating budget cap. Within the last few cycles, we have not had to go there. No guarantee going forward, but the question becomes how much more time would be needed for additional information and dialogue. I would hope that council members come to that council meeting with all of their questions addressed, and not wait till we get to the council table to then bring up questions. This is a rather lengthy process. Plenty of opportunities to raise questions, concerns, etc. That extra week is really kind of a cushion. Should there be any specific items that a council member might want clarity with, I'm of the flavor to indicate that 1 week is sufficient at this point. That should there be any additional information or dialogue to take place, a special meeting can be called within 24 hours, held publicly. We work closely with the mayor and the chief financial officer to get the answers and address any questions from that council member, and we move forward.
And I'll just add to that. I mean, my experience, in the number of years that I've been doing this, and Greg and I have been serving the same amount of time, I have felt that it's been adequate time. I do think, last year was a little tricky because we were without a CFO and we were in a time crunch, and sometimes we felt like we didn't have enough information. But other than that, I think that I have felt that the timing's been pretty adequate. As long as you're paying attention and doing your work and making sure that, you're doing your homework.
All right, thank you, Barbara.
Okay.
I guess before we move to we're going to briefly discuss the 4-year term. Barbara was going to head out. Do we have, are there any additional questions and discussion points for Mr. Schmidt? I mean, he's welcome to stay, but if we don't need him, I don't know that we want to make him sit through discussions that might not be immediately relevant. If not, thank you for coming.
I guess the question I have is the discussion on the 4-year term is the recluse because anyone might be considering being in that role? Is that the Attorney Medic? Is that the guidance?
Well, it wasn't my guidance. I think that was a judgment that the president made herself, is that she's an active candidate for mayor, and that it could be perceived as a conflict for her to engage in the debate. So I think that I'm not providing any guidance. It's up to the individuals.
Yeah, Barbara made a judgment for herself. She decided to recuse herself.
A point of information, though, I thought last meeting that this has been tabled unanimously, the 4-year term, was it not?
I think we had tabled it, not dismissed it. So I think that it was gonna potentially be a topic of conversation later, and we figured while we had members of the council joining us, we could at least get their thoughts to inform maybe a decision to reopen it later on. Josh?
Well, actually, Rick's got his hand up.
Yeah,
I apologize.
I was gonna basically say the same thing Doug had just said. My thought over this the last time, just so I would let Greg and Josh and whoever else wasn't present, I just thought this was not a good topic to bring up during a municipal election year. I just think it's not a good look. Having served on the council for many, many years, I think bringing up a 4-year term or compensation or other things that we had discussed, I just think it's something that we probably should table or put on the back burner and use it in our off year. It's just not a good look. And I'm doing that as a person, like I said, having served on the council,
and kind of like a politic 101 thing for any candidates or anybody that's out there. So that's why I'm gonna hold my ground on it and not be voting on this item, because I think it's just not that it's the wrong idea or the wrong thing, because obviously I ran on the charter question in 2016 for a 4-year term with the mayor. I just think it's the wrong year to be putting it out there on the ballot.
Thank you, Rick. I mean, I think we were gonna maybe not, I think we weren't gonna vote to reopen it as a consideration. I think we were, as a matter of further background, gonna hear from the council members, but it's, I mean, if you would prefer we don't do that, I mean, we could move on from it entirely if that's the consensus.
My understanding is that we were seeking input from people who have useful experience and perspective. And if we can learn more about this important subject, I'm all for it. I would like to hear the thoughts and perspective of people that serve on the council, that have been mayor or will be mayor or might be mayor. This is important. There's probably no good year to have it on the ballot. And yet I still think it's an important item. It's worthy of some thoughtful consideration, even if we ultimately decide not to recommend it to the council.
I see Carl's hands up, and then I do have a couple thoughts on the subject.
Thanks, Josh. Yeah, my hand's up in support of what Richard and also Doug are talking about. And particularly if memory serves me right, when we tackled this 2 years ago or so on the charter, and it happened to also be an election year. We heard thoughts, we heard everybody's opinions, probably hasn't changed a lot. They may have, but I don't think that it's a good year to be doing it if this charter is on a ballot, because it caused problems last time. And I cannot see that it's not going to cause the same exact problems if it goes to ballot and there's term limitations, or not limitations, but terms on there again as a charter situation. I don't think it's a good time to discuss it.
I tend to, oh, I'm sorry, Josh.
No, Ed, go for it.
No, I tend to agree, but also to John's point, it's never going to be a good time, because with the 2-year terms, virtually every year is an election year. And so that's always going to be the case. And it's certainly worth having a conversation about it, even if we're, as John said, likely going to vote to not have it be part of this charter revision. But to Carl's point, I guess it's been discussed before. I wasn't privy to those discussions, but it is a complicated thing, because you've got every 2 years you have an election in this town, but people tend to come out in a mayor. Every year we have an election in this town, and people tend to come out and vote in a mayor's election year and a presidential election year. So, and the Board of Ed is staggered. The Common Council has 5 at-large members, 10 in district. That could be staggered, and just to make everything work so that you maximize your maximums and minimize your minimums in terms of voters coming out to vote. It could be a little dicey, and you can also make it so that the at-large members get 4 years and the in-district members get 2 years. So there's so many moving pieces that it's almost worth a charter revision like on its own, rather than take up as part of an overall sort of thing.
Yeah, that's fair point. Joe?
I'm of the personal opinion that as we are discussing so many components, building blocks of our governance, I kind of feel like it's putting the cart before the horse, discussing a 4-year limit. Again, this is personal opinion, but.
Well, I think with that in mind, I believe there was a plan to hear from or invite council members to meet with us again at a later meeting, so perhaps we save that for them.
Yeah, I mean, look, if you guys are, from just the few members I've heard from, there seems to be a growing consensus as to what your recommendation may be on this particular front. I think that Ed summarized a lot of the issues. And I must say there's both the political conversation, which I think that if you were to have basically council only or council/board of education member elections, those are going to be very, very low turnout elections. And then there's a question about sort of election administration, election costs that come with that. And then of course there's the governing, conversation, which is that I believe mayors in every other major city in the state of Connecticut have 4-year, all those mayors have 4-year terms. So look, I'm not going to tell you what to do here. You guys have to come to your own conclusion. And I agree that since this measure gets voted on, a perceived, I mean, I'm not, that it's like a perceived trying sort of like, expansion of power by adding a 4-year term versus a 2-year term, and that like you're trying to sort of like add less accountability by making the mayor's term longer. I don't necessarily buy that. I think there are very good non-political reasons why there could be a 4-year term for mayor. And those are evidenced by, what happens in other municipalities when it comes to hiring, administration of programs, so on and so forth. But look, I would have to say that I can't imagine a scenario where a 4-year mayoral term doesn't also mean a 4-year council term. And look, I mean, Board of Education members right now have 4-year terms. So it's not unprecedented. It's just that my feeling would be that if you're going to do one, you're going to have to do both. And I'm not sure everyone's up for that. So that's kind of my basic view on this right now. And, you guys are going to have to figure out sort of what your recommendation is going to be. But you asked for input, and so I am here.
I appreciate
Greg, I
it,
don't know
Josh.
if you, as the other council member currently here, I don't know if you had any thoughts you wanted to add.
Well, I support the sentiment of the Charter Commission in terms of the putting too much on the ballot during the upcoming election. The only item that I would ask or task that I would place on this Charter Revision Commission is that if it's not now, when? To define when would be the best possible time. We know, I think we agree there is no perfect time to bring this on the ballot, but I would ask that you deliberate on and come up with a specific time frame when this item should be on the ballot, and then try to sketch out a plan. If that's the only item that's going to be on the ballot, so be it, but come up with a plan as to how we're going to make it happen, because at this point, we're just pushing it down the road. And at some point, we have to just draw a line in the sand and say, we're going to put this on the ballot. If it's a standalone item on the ballot, so be it. But at some point, we need to address it. And so if it's not in 2025, then I would again task this commission to define when the work will be done to get this item on the ballot.
And I would recommend, in keeping sort of consistent with Greg's comment, that that the issue of salaries and a 4-year term and how that's going to be staggered, and whether it's the entire city council or part of the city council, and whether it's going to be made effective the following the next election, or if it's going to be made effective 8 years hence, so that we can take all politics out of it. I think all that should be part of one charter revision, it seems to me, because that's almost reinventing city government. And I think that it's a big enough project that if done well, it should be done together and only that, be considered. The issue of salaries and the 4-year term, how that's going to be staggered, how that plays into the elections that we have in the city, and it should be the next item that we take up. But I think all those controversial items that effectively reinvent city government should occur in one charter revision and probably nothing else.
Right.
I have a question related to that.
John and then Rick.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, you're.
I'll wait.
Okay. Steve Mednick, can you give some guidance on what might be a very stupid question? Is it possible to make a recommendation to have charter revision items for the coming election in November, and also recommend other charter revision items for a future election, such as 2026 or even beyond? I ask because under the existing charter, there won't be another charter commission in Norwalk until, I believe, 2030. And that's...
Council has the right, though, to appoint a charter commission.
Yeah, one of the recommendations somebody made was that we have the charter revisions every 10 years instead of every 5 years. So it may be further out from that. The answer, Commissioner, is yes. We did it in the last charter. This charter revision, which was designed to tackle other substantive issues. I want to remind you, those who served on the last charter commission, among them was the 4-year term, were the political issues. The last commission avoided the political issues because the judgment was made that they didn't want to have any distractions against reorganizing and restructuring the document. So we did specifically have put a mandate in the charter for this short circuit charter commission. One of the alternatives I've been mulling in light of conversations that, listening to your debates, conversations I've had with council, some of the council leadership, is that we might want to put in, whether it mandates another charter revision, although the real conclusion would be to have another charter revision, is, since so much of it involves the legislative function, is to mandate a study for 2 years, whatever it could be, to take a look at all these issues, the compensation issue, the term issue, the level of responsibilities, the interplay we talked about a few moments ago between the council and the mayor and the BET, that kind of structure, to really just kind of focus on that function of government. And you could mandate that it be subject to a charter revision in 2 years, similar to the provision we did here today. I don't want to recommend it because it sounds almost self-serving to recommend things like that, or simply to recommend the concept of the, not the concept, but the actuality of the investigation and the review, and then leave it up to the council in 2 years to decide, okay, I think we've formulated this, let's focus on this, and let's convene a charter commission, which they can do anytime they want. The 5-year review, the 10-year review are mandatory, but a legislative body can establish a charter commission whenever it wants to. So,
Steve, I think
yeah.
you might have misunderstood my question, or at least my intent. Is it possible for this charter commission to make recommendations to the council to have charter revision referendum items, not only for the coming November election ballot, but also for a future year ballot?
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
No, it would be your election. Our charter mandate was for the ballot this November, and because of that, I think you're restricted. I'd have to think about that. I've never had a situation like that. You have to also do it within 15 months of the 15 months of the conclusion. And so query whether November of 2026 would be within 15 months of the conclusion of the process. It might be, actually.
Yeah, it is.
About.
It is.
Yeah, it might just about be, so that if you wanted to put this on the ballot in 2 years, you can. And so that would be something I could look at. I don't know if we're constricted or we could have the council modify the resolution to allow for a kind of a truncated ballot where you have some items on the ballot this year and some on a subsequent year. It's an issue I've never addressed before, and we're somewhat limited because of the resolution, but I can take a quick look at that. And I'm not sure it's happened anywhere else, but I have 2 or 3 lawyers who do similar things to what I do, and I can talk to them. to see
So
what-
I have a question for the 2 council people that are here, Greg and Josh. And I don't think it's a legal problem that would cause anything here. Could council have a meeting on your agenda of yourselves, closed door caucus, whatever, and get your opinions about what you think about a 2-year term versus a 4-year term that is reported then back to this charter commission? And because
Are you asking for like a
we
vote?
went through, I'm sorry, Josh, we went through this, you're right, Stephen, 2 years ago. The exact same thing.
Mhm.
And there were, kind of mixed emotions. And one of the good reasons to have a longer term is that it takes a while to get things done because you guys are busy on a lot of things. So you can't complete a lot of projects in just 2 years and bam, you're running again. It's a little bit like Congress. But anyway, I'd be curious as to know how the members who sit on council feel about a 2-year versus a 4-year term.
Well, I think the overall spirit is we're supportive of it. I mean, we've had this discussion
Mhm.
during the last charter revision work, and as Attorney Mednick stated, we agreed to kind of put that on the sideline because we wanted to clean up, quote unquote, the charter, and we didn't want to have that fuzzy, the thinking of the voters. So we accomplished that in the last charter revision. So I don't think we've changed our approach that and that's why it was teed up for this charter revision commission to take on we want to see how this can be accomplished and what it look like on the ballot. So
Okay.
I don't think the spirit has changed from that direction.
So it's fair to say that council really is expecting us, based upon what you just said, and I would tend to agree, to tackle this issue this time around.
That was the expectation.
Okay.
I mean, what I'm personally hearing tonight is the first, and nothing wrong with that, but it's the first time I'm hearing that the commission wants to postpone addressing this in the upcoming election.
Can I say something? Can I say something to that, Greg? We talked about salaries as well, and I think it was the intent that I think that we take up the issue of salaries as well. It's a big lift to ask someone to work for free for 4 years. I think that's going to dissuade a lot of people from running if it's a 4-year term and they're basically, and the Common Council is as much work as it is, and I can attest to, and I think you guys can certainly attest to how much work it is and how much time it takes, and to have it be effectively uncompensated, $60 a month for 4
50.
It's
It's
47.
It's 50, Ed.
It's a $47 a month, right? For 4 years. That's maybe 2 years. You might give 2 years of your life away like that, but for 4 years without being compensated at all, basically. Yeah, so I think that the two need to be taken up at the same time, I think. And I think the idea was that we didn't want anything that was a poison pill, like, salaries in this charter. What we decided in that regard, I think, or what we've talked about is just putting in the charter some language that the salaries of the Common Council will be as adjusted as the law as the law allows, so that it's innocuous, so that if somehow the state legislature changes the requirement that there be a referendum when increasing or changing salaries of common council members. Once that changes, then the common council, I guess, could elect to, could vote to increase their own salaries or decrease them, as the case may be. So that was the only change that we've talked about putting in the charter as it relates to salaries. But I think until it's clear that the salaries can change, until the state legislature acts to allow it by simple vote of the common council, I think the 4-year term is problematic because it's an unpaid 4-year term.
And I would agree with you. I think you make some good points there, that the compensation level is attached to the length of the term, if we could do that.
Yeah, if I could recognize Rick, he'd had his hand up for.
I'm not even gonna go down this road tonight. I just, reminds me, when my wife is one of these people that won't mix her meats when she's ordering food or at a restaurant. And I think these are two real meaty items that we're discussing here. And I just don't think we're going to get the residents to vote in favor of a whole charter if we put a whole lot of different things into it. I've been there before. I saw it. I was on the ticket with the mayor in the 2016 one, like I said, and it crashed and burns so bad. I just think now we've got some really big things between the budget, which people are really starting to get fired up about, and this other one with the term limits and the compensation and everything. I agree with Ed and Steve both that, we really got to think what our plan is going to be. We're running out of time here.
Yep.
We are really seriously running out of time. And if we want to make this thing fly, or we want people to approve some of this charter, we have too many meaty things in it. It's going to crash and burn. That's all I have to say.
Thanks,
I would
Rick.
agree. I would agree. Same thing we faced 2 years ago.
Yeah, no, I recall. Doug?
No, being part of it on the council side and also being on a charter review. The best thing that the council can do is when they come up with another charter revision, if it's next year or the year after, whatever, is keep it focused exactly on those items. That's been said before. It makes the charge of members of the commission a little bit easier if they want to go off tandem after they do that, but it keeps the commission focused on the beginning. And it's also the most successful. All right, so if it's wants to be council and you want to put in the hopper council salaries, terms of office, you want more district, not district, whatever minority representation, then focus on that. And that's all about the elected officials. And that should be it. No, nothing else, unless there's something so language that was changed that, oh my God, we didn't realize when we changed it, what a mess it was. But I think you'll be a lot more successful than getting it done and getting it vetted properly.
Yeah. Can there be a referendum on these two issues, Richard? And how much would that cost to do a referendum?
You're saying a separate referendum?
Yeah, because we have an election year this year and then not necessarily one next year. So say next year there was a referendum on just these two items for the citizens to vote on.
Well, elections are getting expensive now because of, early voting and different ways of absentee ballots and things like that. So I'm going to tell you, and it's going to be a full city election too. So Steve, I'm sorry, I cut you off.
No, what I was going to say is that also if you do a special referendum, you need to get 15% of the people to vote. And that is highly unlikely in a charter revision standalone referendum. That's why I always recommend that you do it with a general election.
Yeah,
I was probably true. Steve.
Okay.
So on this subject, I think I really would be curious, Steve, if you are able to discover if there is a path for this commission to recommend a charter revision item for the November 2026 election.
I think he said we can't.
Yeah, we can't.
He said we can't.
We go regular, I'm sorry.
I
We
think
can
you're
recommend
restrict-
anything, we can recommend anything, but there's no oaths to it, because they'd have to reappoint a new charter revision commission to take it up.
No.
Because there's,
Not
everything's a time
necessarily,
certain. Everything's a time certain.
Not as
Basically,
well,
June,
yes,
whatever.
as of right now, that's the resolution that created the commission. Set an end date, set an end date for placing this on the ballot this November. So what I need to examine, if the commission wants me to do so, is to see whether the council, it'd be unusual, whether the council at this late date can modify that to separate out, to permit the commission to separate out, if it falls within the 15 months, certain questions, although it wouldn't be their, the issue of questions, by the way, folks, is not yours, it's the council's. And so the council would have to decide whether it wants to reserve for itself the ability to separate out questions for this November ballot and the following November ballot, because the questions are their questions. So one, I might talk to council leadership to see what their thoughts and judgments are on that. And number two, I would have to determine legally whether at this late date in the charter process, you can amend the foundational resolution. I think that may be possible, but I don't know that. But I think politically, since it's their decision, I think I'd want to talk to the council leadership to see if that is a thought that they want to engage in at all, because it's not a commission decision.
I think given that the council can appoint a charter revision, or can call for a charter revision anytime it wants, it seems unnecessary in some ways to do anything other than allow the council or for the council to do just that. And given that there's not a whole lot of time to deal with this issue anyway, that may be the way to go.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know if there are any other questions you have for us, but
No, I think, I mean, it's, I know you guys have other things. It's 8:15 and we still have a couple other agenda things to do here. So I think we'll move on, but, thank you so much to Josh and Greg, and, I know Barbara's already left, but we really appreciate you guys joining us, and, I'm sure we'll have opportunity for other discussion about stuff, even though we're
look
coming
forward to it. And again, I really appreciate the work you guys do. I know you guys have been working really hard, and we look forward to obviously keeping up to date and seeing what your final recommendations are.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yes, and
Right, take care.
I also appreciate the work that you're doing, and the fact that you have seasoned veterans on this commission that have served on the council and the BET is I truly value your thoughts and what you bring forward. So thank you again for all of your efforts.
Thank you.
Thanks, Greg.
Take care.
Thank you guys again, appreciate it. All right, so we had, in order to initiate that discussion, skip past the public participation portion, so I think we should do that now. We do have 3 participants. We're 3 when I last looked. Still 3, 2 have their hands up. Lisa had her hand up first. We'll go with Lisa and then Rich after.
Lisa Britton, can you hear me, Tyler?
Yeah, thanks for hanging in there, Lisa.
Thank you very much. 19 Shorefront Park. Actually, I quite like this because I've actually now rewritten my notes several times after the discussion. So it's kind of nice to be able to participate in real time as opposed to responding to whatever the last meeting was. Anyway, my first question was, where was Minority Party Council Member Heather Dunn when you invited the council? I texted her and she said she knew nothing about this meeting, nor was she invited. So that's kind of my example about how minority party members get excluded from things. But to open with, I wanted to respond to comments that Mr. Camacho made last meeting that a minority party representation was undemocratic. I think his comments were disingenuous and inconsistent with the charters of about 160 other towns around Connecticut. What is also undemocratic is nearly half of Norwalk voting differently, but having no voice or representation on the council or board of ed, save 3-minute comments that get interrupted at the 2.5-minute mark for a time check. You know, and the concern, as I've repeatedly said, is the almost, you know, dictatorship-like party, you know, control of not just wanting the majority, but wanting it all. And Ed, I know he appreciates the dangers of single party rule at the national level. Why not here in Norwalk? But anyway, there are many forms of democratic representation with different electoral rules that ensure diverse representation. Norwalk just doesn't use them, despite 99% of Connecticut municipalities doing so. If we're so concerned about the 4-year term and all the other cities in Connecticut do it, why aren't we concerned about minority party representation? But I'd like to weigh in. I thought it was really good discussion about the 4-year term for mayor and all the moving parts. What I'd like to add is just this, is that without better check and balance procedures like minority party representation or public referendums or equivalent terms for council members, I still think the 4-year term is unlikely to pass. Nearly half the electorate votes differently with no say on policy. So why would they vote to extend executive power without some check and balance? The 2-year term has been the only thing that stopped the entire city from being upzoned in 2023. I appreciate the turbulent times we're living in nationally and why Democrats hold 24 out of 25 major offices. We're a blue state with significant pressure to push back on Republican policies. However, Norwalk's issues have nothing to do with Republicans or Trump. And if anything, has fostered the same bullying behavior.
30 seconds remaining.
Behavior in Connecticut. No, our current budget crisis is not attributed to the downturn in the commercial market. It's Hartford's single party policies and exclusionary zoning and the developer tax credits and 2 decades of unfair ECS funding. So, what I'd like to say is, we have an unsustainable budget because our political system is broken. And so long as the majority party mentality, be it Democrat or Republican, is kind of to bully or mock the opposition or say elections have consequences,
3 minutes.
We'll never have a true democracy or a healthy exchange of the ideas resulting in better policies. So thank you. Thanks for the time, guys.
Thanks, Lisa.
4-year term is linked to my
Party representation.
Okay, we have Rich Bonifant up next.
Am I okay? You can hear me?
We hear you, Rich.
Okay, Rich Bonifant, 17 Park Hill Avenue. I'd like to see something in there that would encourage more in-person meetings. Currently you can be out in Las Vegas at a gambling table on your vacation and vote on a $500 million budget if you're a common council person. There's got to be there's commissions that have never met or seen people in person. All right. All they do is Zoom. All right. You got to encourage more. The council and a lot of these commissions have totally lost touch with their constituents. Let's go to what you were talking tonight about the Board of Ed budget. Well, as you know, that you can't give them anything less than what they gave them this year. And no matter what they tell you, once you give it to them, you can't take it back and they can move it around all you want, which is why in previous councils, we made them buy books and computers on the capital budget, because on the capital budget, you got to buy what you said you're going to buy. Okay. The fire chief explained to me that it takes 3 to 4 years to order a fire truck because there aren't that many manufacturers, and they won't take your order unless you have it approved in your capital budget ahead of time. So that's an important thing, that in the capital budget, you better watch out for what's coming up in the future. Mr. Mednick answered what he said the same thing I'm going to say. Doug, or I forget which one he has said, that maybe a referendum on the on a budget or a referendum on something. None of that counts unless so many percent of the people come out. And I'll tell you right now, when Fodor Farm was going to be a development with 43 houses, the people went to a referendum on that. Some people, the real estate people went to a referendum on that, and they actually won 3-1 to not buy Fodor Farm, but the council voted to do it, and the referendum didn't count. So referendums will never make it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Rich. So I think we have one more person. I'm not sure that they had their hand up there. Yes, Diane Cece.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
We can, Diane.
Hi, hi, everybody. First off, thank you all for serving in this capacity to go over this, no doubt tireless, thankless, payless, except for Attorney Mednick, I presume. The on the payless part. Anyway, I've been trying to follow along as best I can, and I think Lisa just alluded to this too, that it's really what we're left with is commenting after the fact, after hearing discussions, and we can't just jump in and raise our hand to correct something or add something that we think may be relevant. And so that's a little tough versus and to Mr. Bonifant's point too about being in person, where generally there's a little bit more leeway afforded by the chairman. But be that as it may, I think I heard at the last meeting or the one before, Attorney Mednick was giving some timelines now on what the next steps are in meetings, and that at some point this has to go to public hearing. And I'm wondering if you folks are considering a public forum ahead of any kind of your final decisions before you go to public hearing. Something that can be presented to the public, where there can be more of a dialogue and feedback, and not, not the proverbial 3-minute with the warning going on. I've seen enough of a bunch of these changes that I think it would be worthwhile. And I think that it could provide some valuable feedback to you folks for things that people might think is on the right track, is on the wrong track, something they want to see added in that's not being considered, etc. So I don't know where that falls in the timeline, and I don't think there's any regulation in this process that that restricts you from having a forum. And I know it's another imposition on all of your time and evenings, but as just a plain old resident taxpayer over here, I sure would appreciate it. And thank you all.
Thanks, Diane. No, I appreciate all the comments we got, and I think to Diane's point, I think it's probably going to be the last thing we tackle here tonight before doing the minutes and kind of laying out what we're going to do the next couple of meetings. I don't know about a forum format. I think it's a challenge to get this done with the commission members and the invited guests. I think to have a room full of people and have an ongoing discussion, I don't know how that would work, if it would work, but anyone who's interested in being involved with the process, if you feel constricted by the 3 minutes, the input portal has been active on the website throughout. If there's something that anyone wants to share that you can't fit there, you're more than welcome to email it. We'll consider it. We're going to look at the comment grid, to kind of, we all should have looked at it, and we're going to see if there's any issues that we've overlooked and we need to touch on in the coming meetings. So I do agree with Diane that I would like to have some kind of sense of things we're looking to recommend before having a public hearing. I think it's enormously helpful to have people give people a sense of what they're commenting on if we're inviting comment. So I'll see if we can't do that ahead of the public hearing, and then there will be further opportunities. I think it's important to remember that what we're doing here is making recommendations to the Common Council. There'll presumably be more opportunities for input then, and ultimately they will, decide on this. So, with that in mind, I one of the things that we had talked about doing, and I think something we've been doing throughout the process. I'll ask the members who are still here, if folks had a chance to look at the grid, which includes comments we've received from the public, and are there any issues that people think are pressing that we need to get at the towards the top of the agenda at our future meetings. you know, I looked it over. I think of much of what is on here, is stuff we've been discussing and we've been considering. I don't know that there's anything that we've missed or need to address that we haven't yet, but eager to hear from anyone else.
Well, I'm just, I tried an email back because I couldn't find this.
Okay. It is, so this is, if you're looking for this grid on the website, if you go to the charter revision page, there's the comment, the feedback, and then there's some links for the things that were, there's a, you know, you can look at the grid, or rather the portal, you can see what comments have been submitted, and then there's, for things that were too big to fit in there, there's attachments, this is in there.
Okay.
So if anyone else wants to see this document, it's on
I couldn't, that's why I asked
Yeah,
for somebody
I got
said I was having, okay.
Yeah.
Well, we need to make it, I think if there's anything that we can put it more forefront, probably would help as possible. But I agree that with the time left, we gotta get more focus, so on the items before us.
Well, and I think we have some important stuff with, you know, with the budget section, particularly, 10. I think there's some very important things there that you know, in discussion with both the CFO and some of the council members, I think absolutely increase transparency and accountability, and I think that's important stuff to see through. John?
I wanted to ask Steve some information.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Are we all right to discuss what we discussed?
Absolutely.
The suggestion is that in the charter, they have it that the finance committee of the council, and the finance committee of the Board of Ed have a meeting of the together at some point. I'm just asking the question. I'd have to go back and check the charter on the council side. But so what happens if there are no finance committees? Okay, I'm just asking because if you specific in the charter, you're stuck with the charter.
Well,
And the Board of Ed, and the reason I'm asking about the Board of Ed, because years ago, the Board of Ed did away with committees. All right, there were no committee meetings and was brought back again. So I'm just trying to make sure that that language is embedded in a charter. All right, that,
I actually addressed that earlier. Let me just say it one more time. I never put committees of anybody in the charter. I leave it up to the bodies to make those determinations of what their committees are going to be. So what I might say in those provisions is the council or any committees of jurisdiction, the Board of Ed or any committees of jurisdiction. So we don't name entities that exist today that may not exist 5 years from now.
And the other one was a question of, they were talking about the council, one member was about putting a cap. They're putting the cap, the council, the elected body puts a cap on the capital budget, or have the ability to expand the capital budget beyond what the BET. Now, you know, I'm supposed to be here because of my experience. Red flags went off my head like there's no tomorrow, okay? Because elected bodies want to make their constituents happy, and the next thing I know, we're spending more money than we got. But if it winds up that way, then maybe we might want to consider, depending on what track this takes, some kind of compliance that they cannot affect the ratings or the ratings by the Moody's, et cetera, in that enlarging the capital budget. I'm trying to think of a mechanism that, you know, of trying to control that if something goes awry, then you can't affect the credit of the city of Norwalk, because it is vital, or at least require a supermajority plus one. Kind of like what the ethics committees has. You have to have a 10 plus 1 to vote on it to make it happen. If it goes that direction, it may not, it may just sit there. I'm just trying to see what ways we can contain that, because I do have a fear of an elected body having told.
I think whether
That's somebody who sat here, sat there, you know. And the only other thing I do disagree with Greg and Josh on that issue with the timeline of 1 week, only because that works if you're in the majority and you're in certain areas and having certain discussions. If you're sitting in a minority position, I've been on both sides. It's you get the book. And when I first came back, because we didn't have the operating budget, and I first came back in 2003, I'm looking at this book, was anybody gonna explain it the night they handed it to us? The answer is no. So, you know, I think there's a better methodology. That's my opinion, and there you go. So I asked my questions for Steve, if you can find that, you answer those questions, thank you very much.
May I? May I say a couple, may I just have a couple, say a couple of things, Tyler, about, because I missed the first hour. So did we talk about the Common Council setting the cap on the capital budget as well as the operating budget? That would be a change?
No,
Sorry?
we
didn't.
what happened, we did not. What happened was they effectively will, because no one else is setting a cap. The BET currently does not have charter authority to set a cap. They can make recommendations. They'll continue to make recommendations. The council can't really increase under the current language. And I don't remember hearing that anybody wanted to increase. We were arguing or discussing the provision that talked about reinstating items, and maybe that could be construed to be an increase, but that's already in the charter.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
so the cap would be effectively set by the mayor, unless there's an ability to increase it. When the mayor sends the capital budget over, no one else is changing it. The BET can't change it. They just have to act on it and make recommendations. They can make recommendations to increase it, to decrease it, to eliminate things, whatever, but they're not sending over a separate new budget. What they have to do is provide recommendations. One of the complaints that was raised by the council members, Commissioner Camacho, who member of the BET, is that the BET never puts their recommendations in writing, apparently, according to the council members, and the charter does require a writing. So there was no talk about, in my draft, there was cap language because the CFO had suggested that we have the equivalent cap that was in the operating side on the capital side. He has reneged on that provision because that's not consistent with the administration's position. And so that language is going to be changed. I will be revising the language to make it a recommendation.
My suggestion was going to be about that, was going to be to codify what has been, I believe, the custom, or at least the understanding, that the BET sets the cap on the capital side. The Common Council has line item veto or line item authority, and the reverse is true on the operating side. Since that has been the custom, and I believe the understanding, and it's worked, it appears, to this point, I don't know why the administration would have an issue with that. I haven't spoken to anyone in the administration about that, but it seems to me that codifying what has been the case and what has been understood to be the role of the BET and the Common Council on the capital side, that it was basically a reverse of the operating side. I think that would make sense, since it's not altogether clear at the moment, apparently, on in the charter, that is the role, that is the case with the capital budget. So that would have been my suggestion. I think having any language in there that the Common Council can effectively set the cap, having any language that makes it so that they can't do anything if it's going to affect our credit rating, whether or not something adverse, whether Moody's will frown upon the Common Council setting a cap that to such an extent that it will affect our credit rating. That's a matter of opinion. I don't know that you can put anything in in a charter that you can't do something if Moody's will basically object, because who knows what Moody's going to do and why, and there are so many moving parts to that. But I think that the system has worked well thus far, and it's just not apparently clear that that's what the respective roles are. I think to codify it, to make it clear, would make sense. But I don't know why the finance department and the mayor's office would have an issue with that.
Steve, if you can check with the law department here, I know there, corporation councils have opined on this. I cannot tell you what year or even what decade, because the language, as was brought up early on, is a little ambiguous. And it was challenged by some council people. We went to corporation council and rule. I'm just saying I'm saying we should codify, because and my whole time, Ed, has been that's exact experience. They give us a cap, and we can shove everything around that we want in between that as a council person, or you know, but we couldn't spend a dime over what they gave us to spend. All right, so, and that's my understanding. I agree with you, Ed. So maybe you can find some of those decisions from the law department, or their opinions, I should say.
I will talk to them, sure.
John, did you have a couple things?
Yeah, in response to your question, Tyler, there actually are now 3 topics or individual charter revision suggestions I would like to bring up to this commission. And I think they are relatively simple and straightforward, sometimes just changing a few words in the existing charter. And I think the most effective way for me to present those to our commission is the same way I've done it previously. That is, write up an email memo, send it to you and Doug, and ask you guys to forward it to the commission. And then I would simply ask every commissioner who is present tonight to actually read it in advance of our next meeting, so that what I'm trying to say will be clear and I don't have to use valuable meeting time.
That's fine, and presumably we'll do the same thing, John. I'll forward it to go on the website as well. Right?
Yes.
I presume that's what you wanted to do. So
well, it's appropriate. Yes.
It is, absolutely. So, you know, whatever you send us will be available for anyone who wants to review it.
Great. Perfect.
Sorry.
And similarly, I know Rich Bonifant mentioned earlier that he, as a citizen, resident, and voter, would be more confident if people attended our meetings, or if commission members and council members attend meetings in person. And I would just simply want to add that the weather's getting better, and if there is a possibility for more commission members to attend, with the handful of us who do come to the commission chambers, we would be thrilled to see you here. I will bring cookies. Oh, I can't because that's not permitted in the council chambers. I will bring something that will be desirable and rewarding for anyone that appears physically at our next meeting.
Okay.
The days are getting longer, later.
Okay, well, I think the last thing we had on the agenda was we need to go, well, Steve, I will check in with you. I mean, we have a lot to tackle and a little bit of time to do it in. So I will touch base with you in the next couple of days to figure out our agenda for the coming meeting. I think there've been a bunch of requests of information and language and so forth from you that you know, we can check back on. Did you have anything before we go on to the minutes? Because
the only thing I was going to say is I'm going to try to make changes to Article 10 based on the discussion this evening. I will have another conversation with the CFO. I want to keep moving Article 10 so that if not at the next meeting, the meeting thereafter, we can make some decisions. The other thing I want to let you know is that probably at the next meeting, I'll have at least 2 or 3 action items, which you don't have to take action on, but they will be items that you should take action on. These are dealing with Articles 13 and 14. Those are the sections, the historic sections that are supposed to go away. I've been getting responses from the administration. It's going to winnow it down quite a bit. There's a couple of provisions we may put into another section of the charter. So I hope to start doing that so we can start doing some more significant edits of the document as we move toward May.
Absolutely appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, Steve, I think we're good with your portion. We'll do the minutes and then we'll reconvene in 2 weeks. We'll have
and John, I'm looking forward to the special gift I will get for being at the next meeting. See you later.
For you, Steve, it will be very special. Beads, more beads.
All right, Steve, thank you. So Tanya?
Are we able to just finally vote on that we're not going to add term limits as well as compensation once and for all, so that we don't keep coming back every meeting talking about it and everyone kind of like on the fence? Or are we able to kind of just put it
Yeah,
to?
I mean, so we had voted to table it. I will make a note, Tanya. I think at the next meeting, we should, to your point, put that to rest so that it doesn't come up anymore. We can add that as an agenda item. And kind of move that from tabled to yes or no.
Off the table.
Off the table. Let me make a note of that for the next agenda, Tanya. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. Okay, do we have a motion to approve the minutes of the March 4th meeting?
Oh,
Thank you, Doug. Any corrections, revisions to those minutes? I had two.
I have the same too.
The misspellings?
Yeah.
Of my name and your name?
No.
Oh, okay, there was under the attendance section, it should be Tyler as opposed to Taylor. And there was a thing, B, the referendum procedure, paragraph 2, it should be Levin and not Levon. Those were my two. Did you have any?
Not John Lennon, but John Levin.
Levon as like the Elton John song. Levon Helm.
They're not really. On page 4, Lisa Brinton makes reference to minority representation, not majority representation. We already have majority representation.
Okay.
In great abundance. And then on page 6, there's a reference to 4 here terms, which of course should be 4 here terms.
Okay.
There's errors of omission, but we are not allowed to bring those up and submit them. So as a consequence, I shall not.
Okay, so we have those motion to approve with the corrections that John and I have mentioned. Well, not a motion to approve, but approve with those rules. All in favor?
Okay. Bye.
Okay, any opposed? Any abstained? No, okay. Thank you, everybody. I will
adjourn.
Wait, can I say one thing?
Yeah.
John, if you're buying drinks after the next meeting, I'll come. Is that a deal?
Absolutely. Can I just bring a bottle of Mezcal and we're good?
Macaroons?
Before we adjourn, I have a note for the tech people, if you're listening. Last time I attended in person, I could hardly hear Mr. Mednick, and I had a hard time hearing any of the people who weren't in the room. It was very tough for me to hear, and so anything you can do to make our commission members hear the meeting better would be much appreciated. Maybe if I come next time, I'll bring an iPad so I can listen from there or something, but because I like to be with you all in person, but when we were there, Tyler, that time, it was very tough.
I hear you, Jim, absolutely.
Jim, I think the preceding problems have all been fixed, and I think that audibility here is excellent.
Okay, good.
I think there've been some improvements, Jim, so it's maybe worth a shot, but if that's a concern, I get it.
Visibility is good too.
And John, my kids have started season. I got tennis and lacrosse. So you got to give me some slack here, okay? Until the season dies down, okay?
It is tough. I know a lot of people are kind of double booked for meetings and events and yeah.
I'll see you April break though, because there's no practice for either kid.
Cool.
So, me and my husband, we have to divide and conquer. So we're one-on-one.
Yeah, I have baseball starting soon myself, so I might be checking in from the field on some of these nights, but
so I have one question. I have one question, John, for the attendance. I don't disagree that it's nice to have people there, but us sitting up there speaking to an empty room, does that make a big difference?
You're asking to me?
Yes, well, you're the one who brought it up.
So I will say that there is, there is a component of these meetings which is informal, usually before the meeting begins and after the meeting ends, where we are not necessarily discussing where we are not discussing matters relevant to the commission, but nonetheless, I think are improving our relationships with each other. So I find that helpful, yes.
Which is why I raised the issue about drinks after the meeting.
Which
Because
I think.
that's a good way to sort of, rub elbows and maybe talk about stuff informally about what we're doing and stuff. I mean, without violating the open meetings rule or whatever, but I'm just joking, Joe.
All right, well, thank you, everybody. We will sort out our arrangements for 2 weeks from now. We had a motion to adjourn, I believe. We're all in favor.
Sure.
It is what, 8:50. All right, thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right.